we used two different tests, and so we could use a very conservative approach that was to take into account those people that were positive for both tests, as well as a sensitive approach in which we could only consider those who were positive in either one of the tests. We wanted to be very sure.
The result you get is, in some areas, the ones least affected, Spain, one of the countries in Europe that had the biggest impact of coronavirus at the outset, a drastic lockdown, 3% who test positive. In some of the harder hit areas, an average of 7%. This is endless. We're not going to see a second wave. This is the first wave that's going to last forever, it seems.
Yeah, I think so. Well, there is a lot of debate in the scientific community around about which is really measuring when you get to measure immunity through antibodies, and which is the role of another kind of immunity which depends on cells like T lymphocytes. We get, as Christine was saying, there is a lot of things we don't know yet in this epidemic. But if you take into account what we can measure right now, which is antibodies, between 3% and 7% of the people in Spain have been exposed to the virus. So there is a huge amount of people that have not gone through the disease or have not contacted the virus yet. So there is a lot of people that might be susceptible to it.
All right, Linda Bauld, of course, that brings us to, I guess I'll call the Sweden question, or in your case, perhaps the Boris Johnson question. You remember the UK Prime Minister back in March who talked up herd immunity. It seems as though to get to herd immunity, you'd have had to wait a very long time.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And in fact, in an accompanying editorial in The Lancet to the excellent paper we were just hearing about from Spain, it does also point to data from Sweden, where, as you know, the strategy has been more to keep the economy, premises, businesses, and educational settings open, with the potential that herd immunity would be built up. In other words, more people would come into contact with the virus and more people would develop some immunity. But that Lancet commentary editorial shows that even in Sweden, it's less than 10%, even in urban areas, who have any antibodies. In the UK, in the beginning of the pandemic, as we were hearing from Kirsty before, the science isn't certain and there's disagreement between scientists, so we had conflicting scientific advice to our government. And it's absolutely clear that in the early days, there was a section of the advising community who thought that herd immunity was the way to go. And in fact, there still are scientists who think we should pursue that. But I think as we move through this pandemic, we're seeing that it's not the best strategy, even though there are many countries for whom hard lockdowns over long periods are not sustainable. So it's really, really tricky, but I think that concept is being gradually debunked.